Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've been a long-haul trucker for about 12 years now, and while I've had my share of strange nights and shady stops, nothing ever stuck with me quite like what happened in Alabama back in the fall of 2019. I was running a solo route from Atlanta to Shreveport, hauling refrigeration equipment. Normally I'd take I-20 straight across, but that week, a brutal storm system had washed out a big section of highway near Tuscaloosa. GPS rerouted me down a mess of backroads, winding, narrow stretches lined with trees and the occasional boarded-up church or rusted-out barn. Cell service was patchy at best, and by the time dusk rolled in, I was running lower on diesel than I liked. I pulled off near a gravel shoulder around 7 p.m. to figure out my next stop, when a white Chevy Silverado slowed and rolled up beside my cab. The driver was this older guy, mid-60s maybe, leathery face, trucker cap with crimson tide stitched across the front. He leaned out and asked if I needed fuel. I told him yeah. I was looking for a station that still had power out there. He said there weren't any working stations for miles, but he knew a spot, an old rest stop just past the hollow, where a guy sold diesel out of drums. Said he'd been using him for years when storms hit. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I'd been in worse binds, and he seemed like he meant well. Before I could say much, he waved and said, "Just take the exit past mile marker 214. It's not on the map, but you'll see the dirt road." About 20 minutes later, I found the spot. I almost missed the turn. It was barely more than a break in the trees with a rusted sign half buried in brush that just said, "Rest." I pulled in slow. The place looked like it had been hit by a tornado years ago and never fixed. The structure was more of a shed than a building. One wall caved in, part of the roof missing, and what looked like an old vending machine gutted and left out front. But what really made my stomach knot was the silence. No crickets, no wind, just that kind of dead, thick quiet that makes you feel like you're being watched. I left the engine idling and stepped down from the cab. The air smelled weird, like rain-soaked metal and something faintly sweet, almost like syrup but off. As I was scanning the area, a man stepped out from behind the shack. He was tall, thin, wearing a filthy gray shirt with holes in the collar, and cargo pants that were soaked up to the knees. His eyes were watery, like he hadn't slept in days, and he smiled in this slow, unnatural way, like someone playing friendly, but their heart wasn't in it. He raised a hand and called out, "Need diesel?" Then he pointed to a big blue drum behind the building. "Got plenty left." I didn't answer right away. I just kind of nodded and walked slowly around the front of the truck, pretending to check a strap. I didn't like the look of him, and something about the way he kept glancing toward the trees made me uneasy. I glanced at the drum. No markings, no hose, just a rusted spigot near the bottom. Didn't even look like the kind of setup that could actually fuel a semi. I stalled, saying I wanted to check the tank level again. Bought myself some time. That's when I noticed movement in my side mirror. Two men. They were maybe 50 feet back, creeping low between the trees on either side of my trailer. They weren't walking up normal either. They moved in that slow, deliberate way, like they were trying not to snap twigs. One of them crouched low, the other holding something long at his side, maybe a crowbar or a pipe. I didn't know what their plan was, but it sure as hell wasn't to welcome me to the neighborhood. My heart jumped into high gear. I backed toward the cab, acting casual, but I was sweating bullets under my jacket. The first guy, the one with the smile, noticed me looking and suddenly yelled out, "Hey, you all right there, buddy?" Way too cheerful. Way too loud. I didn't answer. I climbed up fast, slammed the door, and locked it in one motion. The second I turned the key, I saw both of the guys in the mirror freeze. Then they sprinted. One came straight for my passenger door, the other circled toward the rear. I didn't wait. I floored it. Gravel kicked up and the truck fishtailed for a second before the wheels caught. I didn't look back. I drove like a bat out of hell until I hit a fork in the road and just chose right. hoping it'd lead somewhere lit. It took maybe 10 minutes before I saw a gas station. Real one, with lights, pumps, and a guy in a vest behind bulletproof glass. I parked under the brightest damn floodlight they had. I sat there shaking for a bit before going in. Told the cashier what happened, more out of adrenaline than expecting him to do anything. The guy just raised his eyebrows and said something like, "Damn, that must have been near Copeland's Hollow. You're lucky you got out." I asked what he meant, and he shrugged. "People been disappearing out there for years. Some say it's just the terrain. Others say it ain't." I didn't press. I just bought a coffee, refueled, and sat in the cab for another hour before even thinking of pulling back onto the road. For days after that, I kept replaying everything in my head. The way that old man had pulled up out of nowhere, the weird smell, the silence, the way those two creeps had moved through the trees like they'd done it before. I tried convincing myself it was just a robbery setup, that they wanted the load, or maybe even the truck. But the more I thought about it, the more it didn't add up. There wasn't any way to siphon that fuel from a drum like that into a rig, not without a proper hose or pump. And the guy never even walked over to it. He just pointed at it like a prop, like it was bait. A few weeks later on another route, I was talking with another driver at a truck stop diner near Meridian. We got on the topic of weird detours and sketchy stops, and I mentioned what happened near mile marker 214. His face went pale. He said, "You sure that place was real, that exit?" I pulled out my notebook where I jotted down odd things during drives and showed him. He shook his head and said, "That stretch doesn't have any marked exits for 12 miles. I know. I drove it last week, nothing but woods and fences." That sent a chill down my spine. I went back to check later myself. Drove that whole section. There's no break in the trees, no rusted sign. Nothing. I know what I saw. I remember the trees, the gravel, the warped shack, and those eyes. The kind of eyes that don't belong on someone just trying to help. I don't talk about it often, mostly because people either don't believe me or they do, and that's worse. Because if you believe me, that means there's still something out there. Some trap that sets itself up just long enough to catch the next poor soul who runs low on fuel during a storm. And if you've ever driven through Alabama during storm season, you know how easy it is to feel lost, even on a paved road. Since then, I don't stop at places I don't recognize, no matter how desperate the situation. I keep a reserve canister in my cab, just enough to buy me time if I'm ever running low again. That night changed how I drive, how I sleep, how I trust. I never saw those men again, but I still dream of that place sometimes, always in silence, always just before the sound of gravel crunches beneath boots that aren't mine. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't driven off when I did. I just know I wasn't supposed to leave. I've been driving trucks for a little over 14 years now, mostly short hauls through the East Coast, but sometimes I'll take longer runs when the pay's decent. This happened 2 years ago, around late October. One of those nights where the road feels like it's swallowing you whole. I was on Route 29 in Virginia, heading southbound with a shipment of auto parts, planning to stop at a rest area near Lovingston. It was late, maybe 1:30 in the morning, and the fog had gotten so thick it looked like I was driving through milk. My headlights barely cut through it, and the radio had long since lost signal, so it was just me and the hum of the engine. Somewhere past the Red Hill area, I saw her. At first I thought it was a deer on the shoulder, something white, barely visible in the haze, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman. She was waving both hands slowly over her head, not frantically, just steadily, like she was trying to make sure I saw her without startling me. I slowed down fast and pulled over a few feet ahead. My hazard lights blinked through the fog as I looked at her in the mirror. She didn't approach right away, just stood there for a few seconds, arms dropped to her sides, before finally jogging up to the passenger door. I rolled down the window and asked if she was okay. She looked to be in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. Long blonde hair that looked wet, though it wasn't raining. She had on jeans and a faded red sweatshirt, no jacket. Her face looked tired but not hurt, just spaced out. She said her name was Rachel and that her car broke down just a mile or two back. She asked if I could drop her off at the next exit, where there was supposedly a gas station. I told her to hop in, and she climbed up fast without another word. She didn't have a phone, which struck me as odd, but I didn't press her. At first, we just rode in silence. She kept glancing behind us, like she was watching for someone. After a couple minutes, she asked if I had seen the black SUV. I hadn't. Then she said, "It's been following me for 2 hours. I think they know where I am." Her voice was shaky now, and she'd started wringing her hands. I tried to reassure her, told her no one was behind us, just fog and empty road. But her whole vibe shifted. She started muttering about how they never stop, and how she shouldn't have left. Her eyes darted around the cab like she was looking for exits. I tried to keep calm, but it was getting harder to ignore how off she seemed. She started asking me weird questions, like if I believed in patterns or if I'd ever seen the same person twice in different states. At one point, she asked me if I'd ever blacked out and woken up in a place I didn't recognize. I said no, and she just nodded like she expected that answer. Then she leaned close to the passenger side window and stared into the dark like she was waiting for something to leap out of it. Her leg was bouncing like crazy, and she kept whispering, "They know I'm in here." By the time we reached the next stop sign, it was an old intersection with nothing around but trees. She suddenly yelled, "Stop here! I need to get out now!" I told her we were almost at the exit, but she was already unlocking the door. I barely had time to brake before she swung it open and jumped down. I called out to her, but she didn't look back. She ran straight into the woods on the right side of the road, disappearing into the fog like she'd never been there. I sat there for a second stunned, then got out with a flashlight and called her name a few times. Nothing. Just that thick, wet silence hanging in the trees. I thought about going after her, but honestly, I was spooked. The way she ran, the look in her eyes before she jumped. It didn't feel like someone just scared or confused. It felt wrong. Like she knew something I didn't, and whatever it was close. I waited there another 5 minutes, then called the non-emergency police number. A deputy met me about 30 minutes later. I explained everything, what she looked like, what she said, where she ran. He listened quietly, then asked me, "Did she say her name was Rachel?" That froze me. I said yes, and he nodded, almost like he'd been expecting it. Then he told me I wasn't the first trucker to report her. Over the past few years, a handful of drivers had seen a woman matching her description, waving them down somewhere along Route 29, always at night, always near fog, always asking for a ride. Each time she'd vanish not long after, either walking off or just disappearing when they weren't looking. But here's the kicker. No Rachel's ever been reported missing that matched her description. No car was ever found, and no one who's ever gone looking for her has come back with anything solid. I just stood there, trying to process what the deputy had said. I asked him if it could have been some kind of prank, maybe a local woman with mental health issues, but he just shook his head. "Every time someone reports her," he said, "she gives a different name, but the description's always dead on. Same clothes, same behavior, same place." Then he said something that really stuck with me. "Most drivers think they're helping someone lost, but some of us think she's stuck." I didn't know what that meant at the time. I still don't, but it gave me chills. After the deputy left, I sat in the cab for a while with the engine running. I kept the door locked and the radio off, just listening. The fog was even heavier now, and every shadow looked like it could move. My hands were still gripping the wheel like she might come running back out of the woods at any second. I replayed the whole thing over and over in my head, trying to find something I'd missed, a detail that made it make sense. But there wasn't one. Just a woman who showed up out of nowhere, asked for help, then vanished. The next morning, I stopped at a diner in Lynchburg and told another trucker what happened. He didn't laugh. He didn't call me crazy. He just looked down at his coffee and said, "You saw the Route 29 girl." I asked him what he meant, and he told me he'd heard the same story 3 times. Once from a guy he worked with, once from his cousin, and once from some dude on a Facebook group for long-haul drivers. Always a woman on the side of the road, always around that same stretch, always gone before sunrise. Some folks say she died out there, he added. Others say she's running from something worse. To this day, I don't know what I saw. I know I picked her up. I know she spoke to me. I know I heard the panic in her voice when she said we were being followed. And I know I saw her leap from my cab and vanish into those woods like the earth swallowed her whole. I haven't driven that stretch at night since. I always reroute, even if it adds hours. And if I ever see someone standing in the fog again waving me down, I don't think I'll stop. Not because I don't care, but because whatever Rachel was, I don't think she needed saving. I think she was trying to warn me. I used to do freelance deliveries back in 2021, mostly out west. I'd pick up extra work through an app that connected me with small companies needing urgent drop-offs. Nothing glamorous, just me, my old Honda CR-V, and whatever I could haul. That September, I had a job that sent me from Flagstaff to a smaller town near the New Mexico border. It was supposed to be a straightforward run, 3-hour drive tops, but I decided to take a shortcut through a lesser-known service road that cut across reservation land. The map showed it shaved off 30 minutes. It was one of those decisions that feels smart at the time, and then comes back to haunt you. The road started off fine, just narrow and dry, with that kind of red Arizona dust that settles into every crack of your car. The sun was hanging low, casting long shadows over the landscape. There was nothing around, not a single car, not even utility poles. Just desert scrub and the occasional twisted tree that looked like it had been struck by lightning a decade ago. About 45 minutes in, my engine started sputtering. The dash lit up like a Christmas tree, and I coasted onto the sandy shoulder. No signal on my phone, of course. I remember stepping out, the heat hitting me like a wall, and realizing how damn quiet it was. No birds, no wind, just silence, and the faint creak of my engine cooling down. After a few minutes of pacing and trying to find a higher spot for reception, I got just enough signal to call for roadside assistance. They told me it'd be at least 2 hours. I climbed back into the car, reclined the seat, and tried not to stress. That's when I noticed them. A group of kids, or maybe teens, and standing off the road about 30 feet away. I hadn't heard them approach, and they weren't walking. Just standing there, watching. I squinted, trying to make out their features, but the light was starting to fade, and they were backlit by the sunset. There were 4 of them, maybe 5, all in dark clothes. No movement, just staring. At first, I thought maybe they were locals passing through, or just curious. I gave a little wave through the windshield like an idiot. No reaction, no sound, nothing. Then one of them tilted his head, really slowly, like a dog does when it hears something strange. That tiny gesture made my stomach drop. Another one crouched down like he was getting ready to spring, but didn't move after that. Just crouched, frozen. I suddenly became very aware of how far I was from anything. My doors were locked, thank God, but the windows were down halfway. I leaned over and rolled them up, trying not to make it obvious that I was nervous. I sat there gripping the steering wheel like that was going to do anything. They hadn't moved closer, but the energy shifted. One of them started walking, slowly, in a wide arc around the front of my car. Another followed, dragging something behind him, a stick maybe, or a piece of metal, scraping it along the gravel. Still no talking, not even whispers between them. Just the crunch of their footsteps and that awful scraping sound. My heart was racing. I kept telling myself they were just messing around, trying to freak me out. Maybe even pranksters who knew this road was a trap for dumb outsiders like me. But deep down, it didn't feel like that. They began tapping on the glass. Not all at once, just one at first. A soft tap-tap on the rear passenger window, then another one near the front. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, almost like they were trying to mimic a pattern. When I turned to look, one of the teens had their face almost pressed against the glass. Their features were smeared with dust, but what stood out was the eyes, way too wide, unblinking. He smiled at me, but it didn't feel like a real smile. It looked rehearsed, like someone who had seen people smile and was imitating it without understanding what it meant. Then came the animal sounds. I swear I'm not making this up. One of them let out a high-pitched howl that echoed into the desert, followed by another imitating a coyote, badly, like a child who'd only heard it on TV. Then came the growling. Low, guttural, and unsettlingly close. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from behind my driver's seat. For a second, I genuinely thought someone had gotten into the car without me noticing. I spun around, heart pounding out of my chest, only to find nothing. Just the empty back seat and my duffel bag. When I turned back to the windshield, they had closed in tighter, closer now, right up against the doors. I tried to start the car again, praying it would magically come back to life. Nothing. Just that hopeless click. That's when one of the teens, a girl this time, I think, stepped in front of my hood and dropped to all fours. Her arms were too stiff, her head cocked to the side, and she started crawling under the car. Another one followed, crawling low, almost slithering across the ground. I threw the gear into neutral without thinking, ready to push the car downhill if I had to. But before I could even move, headlights appeared in the distance. A truck, headed straight toward us. The moment those headlights crested the hill, everything shifted. The teens scattered like insects, not running but slipping back into the dark, disappearing behind brush and rocks like they'd never been there. The girl who had been under the car vanished so fast I didn't even see where she went. Within seconds, they were gone. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the truck came closer and slowed beside me. It was an old Ford, mud-caked and loud. The driver leaned out, middle-aged guy, scruffy beard, big frame, and asked if I was okay. I managed a shaky nod and told him my car had died. He didn't ask about the kids, just told me to hop in, said he'd take me to a station a few miles down. On the ride, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting one of them to be following us in the dark. The man didn't say much, just turned up the radio like he didn't want to talk. When we reached the gas station, I got out, thanked him, and went to call the tow service again. That's when a local sheriff pulled in, young guy, probably late 20s, friendly enough. I mentioned what happened, half laughing it off, thinking maybe it was some weird local prank. His face dropped. He told me flat out that I was lucky. That area had seen reports of groups messing with stranded drivers for months, mostly at dusk. People followed, people chased, sometimes cars vandalized, sometimes worse. He didn't go into detail, just told me not to drive that road again. Even locals avoided it now. Said no one had been caught, but the behavior didn't match any gangs he knew of. They don't talk, he said. Just surround you, like they're rehearsing something. That line stuck with me. I asked if anyone had been seriously hurt. He didn't answer, just gave me a long look and walked back to his cruiser. That night I stayed in a motel nearby, double-locked the door, pushed the dresser in front of it, the whole deal. Couldn't sleep. Every time a car passed outside, I flinched. It's been a couple of years now, but I still avoid remote roads. Doesn't matter how much time I'd save. And I've never taken a delivery job again. I don't know what those kids were doing out there, or why they acted the way they did. Maybe it was drugs, maybe it was something else. But what scares me the most is how silent they were. No threats, no shouting, just that eerie coordination. Like they'd done it before, like they were waiting for something, and for all I know, they still are. I don't usually post on forums like this, but what happened to me last fall still makes my skin crawl. and I guess I just need to get it out. My name's Rachel. I was 20 at the time, a junior in college, and I'd gone down to Asheville for a long weekend with some friends from school. Just a little break before finals. Mountains, beer, bad decisions. The plan was to catch the 4 p.m. Greyhound back to campus Sunday, but I overslept, missed it by nearly an hour, and had no other way to get back that night. My roommate had an early class Monday and couldn't come get me. That's when I made the mistake of using this travel app I'd only used once before. Ride Match. It pairs you with drivers already headed your way. Harmless enough, right? I found one last ride leaving around 6 p.m. A guy named Brian. His profile photo showed a middle-aged man with graying hair and glasses, smiling next to a golden retriever. His reviews were mostly fine. Nothing glowing, but no red flags either. Said he was headed through Greensboro, which was perfect. I messaged him, and within 10 minutes he replied and sent his car details. It was a silver Ford Fusion. I don't know why, but even as I stood outside waiting for him to pull up, I had this tiny knot in my stomach. Just a flicker of doubt. I brushed it off. Told myself I was being dramatic, and when the car pulled in, Brian rolled down the window, waved, and greeted me with a friendly, "You must be Rachel." I got in. The car smelled faintly like pine air freshener and old coffee. There was a blanket on the back seat, and a reusable water bottle in the cup holder. Totally normal stuff. We made small talk for the first half hour, where I went to school, what I was majoring in, how he used to work in logistics. He talked a little too much, but I figured he was just chatty. He wasn't creepy, not yet. But then he asked if I had a boyfriend. I kind of laughed it off, saying something like, "Yeah, he's pretty protective," even though I was very much single. That seemed to quiet him down for a while, but something shifted after that. His tone got heavier. He asked if I ever felt unsafe traveling with strangers. Said it must be thrilling being a pretty girl on her own. I remember staring out the window after that, trying to act normal while my heart started picking up speed. We were passing fewer exits now, and I noticed we were no longer on the route my GPS had mapped out. I asked casually, "Hey, this isn't I-40, right?" He just said something vague like, "Shortcuts are faster this time of day." But the farther we drove, the darker it got, and the more I realized we weren't heading anywhere near campus. I told him I needed to use the restroom and asked if we could stop soon. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror and said, "Oh, I know a good spot. Real private." That's when I knew I had screwed up, badly. I tried to keep calm, but my mind was racing. I reached into my bag as discreetly as I could and slid my phone into my hoodie pocket, screen facing out. My hands were shaking. I opened my text thread with my best friend Sarah and typed out, "Something's wrong. I don't know where he's taking me." Then I remembered she had location sharing enabled on her iPhone. I swiped up, hit share my location, and prayed she'd see it. Then I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I held the phone up to my ear and pretended to call someone. I put on my best confident voice and said, "Hey babe, just wanted to check in. Yeah, Brian just took a different route, but I'm sharing my location. You see it?" I said it loud enough for him to hear. He didn't respond right away, but I saw his knuckles tighten on the steering wheel. For a moment, I thought he might try to take the phone from me or say something aggressive, but instead, he went totally quiet. Then, after about 30 seconds of silence, he muttered, "Didn't know you had someone tracking you." I forced a smile and replied, "Yeah, my boyfriend's kinda obsessed with that stuff. Real paranoid." We drove in silence for another few minutes, and then suddenly, he pulled over. Just off some 2-lane back road surrounded by trees. No gas station, no rest stop, just gravel and woods and the hum of cicadas outside. He threw the car in park and turned to me with this weird expression, half smile, half blank. "I think you should get out here," he said flatly. I blinked. "What?" "You can figure out your own way back," he added, unlocking the doors with a click. That moment was weirdly more terrifying than when I thought he might attack me. It was like I'd been discarded. Like he realized I wasn't going to be an easy target, so he just gave up. I got out of the car slowly, not taking my eyes off him. He waited until I stepped away from the door, then peeled off without another word, tires kicking up dirt and rocks. I stood there completely alone with barely one bar of service. Sarah called me less than 2 minutes later. She'd seen the location drop and knew something was off. I was still shaking, barely able to speak. She got my location to her brother, who lived about 30 minutes away and happened to be home. He drove straight out to find me. I sat on the side of that road, hugging my knees, trying not to cry until I saw headlights that didn't belong to a silver Ford. When her brother pulled up, I broke down. I told him everything I could remember. The route, the car, what Brian looked like. We called the police right there, and I filed a report that same night. The police took my statement seriously, which honestly surprised me. They asked for screenshots, the app info, and whatever messages I had exchanged with Brian. I gave them everything. About 2 days later, I got a call from a detective who told me they had looked into his ride match profile and found 3 other complaints, all from young women. One of them said he'd started driving into the woods before she forced him to stop by threatening to jump out. Another said he locked the doors and tried to chat for hours before finally letting her go in a remote area. None of them pressed charges at the time, mostly because nothing happened. That word still sticks with me. Nothing happened, as if you have to be physically hurt for it to count. I learned later that Brian had a history of changing cars and rotating his profile picture. Always something safe, dogs, smiles, sunset selfies. I don't know if he was ever arrested. The detective said they were building a case, but the Ride Match app quietly banned him after I sent them a copy of the police report and a few choice words in all caps. That part felt empty, like it didn't match the weight of what almost happened. What could have happened if I hadn't trusted my gut or shared my location? The app never emailed me back, never apologized, just silently wiped his profile like nothing had ever existed. For weeks after, I couldn't get in a car with someone I didn't know. Hell, even Ubers made me panic. I kept picturing that weird smirk, the way his voice flattened when he told me to get out. I bought a personal alarm, started carrying pepper spray, and told all my friends to never use rideshare apps without checking in constantly. I even got into the habit of pretending to talk to someone on the phone when I feel even slightly unsafe in public. It's like that night rewired my brain. I don't scare easily, but something about how calm he was, that's what still gives me nightmares. There was no rage, no shouting, no threats. Just a quiet decision, like I was a detour that didn't work out. Anyway, that's my story. I'm safe now, and I know I got lucky, way luckier than some. But I can't help but wonder how many other girls never reported him. How many didn't even realize they were being tested. That's what it felt like. A test. Like he was seeing how far he could push without consequences. So if you're reading this and you ever feel something is off, listen to that voice in your head. Don't be polite. Don't brush it off. You're not being dramatic. You might just be saving your own life. Back in the summer of 2016, I was working long hauls for a fuel distribution company based out of Billings, Montana. I'd been driving gas tankers for about 6 years at that point, mostly solo routes, mostly quiet. I was 38, divorced, no kids, and spent more time behind the wheel than in my own apartment. The job had its rhythms, late nights, early mornings, pit stops in ghost towns that barely had names. I actually liked the solitude. That day started like any other. I had a northbound run delivering fuel to a small reservation outpost just past Havre. Clear skies, decent coffee in the thermos, and a Hank Williams playlist on shuffle. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I spotted the pickup. It was an older Ford F-150, dark green, maybe late 90s model. Beat-up body, but it had those brand new high-beam LEDs that practically burned into your mirrors. I first noticed it outside Big Sandy, when I checked my side mirror after switching lanes. Nothing weird. Montana highways are long and empty, so it wasn't unusual to have another vehicle on your tail for a while. But this guy wasn't just behind me, he was glued to me. No matter if I sped up a little or eased off the gas, he matched me perfectly. No attempt to pass, no distance increasing. Just there, quietly tailing. I tried to brush it off. Told myself maybe he was heading to the same town. But after 40 miles of that same damn truck in my mirror, through curves, empty stretches, and even when I took a sudden exit off Highway 2, I started getting that tight feeling in my chest. The kind that says something's off. I took another turn at a gravel county road, not part of my route, just to test him. Sure enough, his tires hit that gravel 3 seconds after mine. That's when I stopped pretending it was a coincidence. I wasn't just being followed, I was being hunted. I didn't want to panic, but my pulse was spiking and my palms were starting to sweat. I grabbed my CB and checked for any other drivers in the area. Silence. No one for miles. The only thing I could think to do was head for the next truck stop I remembered. An old place outside a town called Kremlin. Barely a blip on the map, but it had a service bay and lights, and that was enough. I eased off the county road, made my way back to the main highway, and took the long way in just to see if the guy would stay with me. He did, the entire time. When I finally pulled into the lot, the pickup didn't pull up next to me. It went all the way to the far end near the dumpsters and turned off its headlights. That's when the guy stepped out, alone, carrying a small duffel bag, and he started walking toward me. I didn't even bother shutting off the engine. I jumped out of the cab and walked quickly toward the service bay door, trying to act like I was just stretching my legs. But I was watching him. Every step he took felt calculated. Not rushed, not slow either. Just deliberate. He had a short buzz cut, pale skin, and one of those faces that you forget the second you look away. Totally featureless, like someone you'd pass in a grocery store without a second glance. The duffel bag was black, medium-sized, and he held it low, almost dragging it. No logo, no patches. Just a nondescript bag in the hand of a man who hadn't taken his eyes off me since he stepped out of that truck. I slipped into the service bay through the side door and quietly shut it behind me. There were no mechanics on shift. It was after midnight, but the inside had a landline and a vending machine that still worked. My cell had no signal out there, classic rural Montana, so I went straight for the wall phone and dialed 911. I kept my voice low, trying not to breathe too loud, and told the dispatcher everything: the guy, the truck, the bag, how long he'd been following me. She stayed calm, asked for my location, and told me to stay hidden. Officers were on the way, but it'd take at least 20 minutes. I crouched behind a stack of tires, staring at the narrow glass window in the bay door, waiting to see if that guy was coming. And he was. A few minutes later, I saw the shadow move across the window, just a blur at first, then more defined as he got closer. He didn't knock, didn't call out, just stood there. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I swear he was listening, like he was trying to hear where I was inside. My heart was thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it through the walls. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the shadow vanished. I stayed frozen for what felt like 10 full minutes. The next sound I heard was a car door slamming. Not mine, his, but he didn't drive off. I peeked out the far side window of the bay and saw him standing beside his truck now, facing it, like he was just waiting. For what, I didn't know. It wasn't until the first set of red and blue lights flashed down the road that he moved again. He didn't run. He just calmly walked around the back of his truck, opened the driver's side door, and sat down. The officers surrounded him within seconds, 2 cruisers boxing him in. I stepped out as soon as one of them waved to me, hands shaking, trying to explain what had happened. The man didn't protest. He just sat there in his seat, hands on the wheel, eyes forward like he was waiting to be arrested. They pulled him out and searched the truck. I watched from behind one of the cruisers, still shaking, still trying to process that this wasn't some weird dream. When they opened his duffel bag, I saw one of the deputies pause. Then another one walked over, and they both started pulling things out. Rubber gloves, a pair of zip ties, duct tape, a flashlight, a notepad. I couldn't see all the writing on it, but I saw the column headings. Names, license plate numbers, times. One of the cops asked if I had a regular schedule. I told him, yeah, most of us do. We pick up loads around the same time every week. The cop nodded and said, "This guy's been keeping track of drivers. You were marked down for tonight." Apparently, I wasn't the only one. They found 4 other drivers listed by first name, including pickup locations and estimated route times. Some of the plates matched rigs out of Billings and Great Falls. The detective on scene told me, off the record, they'd been tracking reports of similar incidents across the state, but they never had a clear suspect until now. Most drivers never reported being followed. A couple had gone missing over the last year, ruled as accidents or just didn't show up, but nothing ever confirmed. He said I was lucky. That word stuck with me. Lucky. The man refused to speak. No ID on him, no wallet, nothing with his name on it. They eventually traced the pickup to a rental under a fake license. Last I heard, the FBI got involved, thinking it might be part of something larger, a pattern involving isolated drivers on back roads. But none of that brought me much peace. I quit long hauls a few months later. I still drive fuel, but only within the city now. I don't do rural routes anymore. Can't. Every time I see a pair of headlights trailing behind me too long, my stomach knots up. I haven't been able to shake that night from my head. I think what unsettles me most is how casual he was. Like he'd done this before. Like he expected it to go exactly as planned. And I keep thinking, if I hadn't pulled off where I did, or if there hadn't been a phone inside that bay, or if I just tried to confront him, would I have just disappeared like the others? Would they have found my truck abandoned on the side of the road? Engine still warm? Coffee half full in the cup holder? I don't know. All I know is I still double-check my rearview mirror every 5 minutes. And every now and then, when it's real late and real quiet, I swear I can still feel that man watching me. I'm not really the camping type. I grew up in Sacramento, surrounded by traffic, strip malls, and the constant hum of city life. But last fall, after getting laid off from my tech job and dealing with a pretty nasty breakup, I needed a reset. That's how I ended up spending a few weeks on the road with my girlfriend Dana, in a beat-up old camper van we borrowed from her uncle. We weren't hardcore adventurers or anything, just wanted to see some trees, breathe cleaner air, maybe remember what it felt like to be alive again. That night in Oregon, we had no clue how close we came to losing everything. It was mid-October, and we'd been driving through the Cascade Range. We'd passed Crater Lake earlier that day, and by sunset, we were winding along this narrow scenic route with barely any cars and just a sliver of phone signal. Eventually, we pulled into a little gravel overlook that jutted out toward a forested valley. No lights, no noise, just us, the moon, and the scent of damp pine. The van wasn't anything special, a '99 Chevy with curtains Dana sewed herself, but it felt safe enough. We cooked some ramen on our tiny stove, listened to a podcast, and fell asleep tangled in a heap of sleeping bags and blankets in the back. I woke up first, not because of a noise, but because the air felt wrong. The kind of stillness that makes your skin pull tight like it knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. I checked my phone, 2:04 a.m., no new notifications, no signal. Then I heard it, a sound so soft I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. A tap, then another, deliberate, spaced out like someone trying not to wake a baby. I propped myself up and looked at Dana. Her eyes were already open. She'd heard it too. We stayed completely still, barely breathing. The knocks were coming from the rear doors, the ones right behind where we were lying. Dana slowly reached toward the curtain covering the back window and pulled it down just a few inches. I watched her face shift from confusion to terror in real time. Then I looked too. A man stood outside, inches from the door. Middle-aged, long gray beard, dirty jacket. One hand held a flashlight, the other, a crowbar, just hanging at his side like it belonged there. He wasn't knocking to be let in. He was testing to see if we'd react. I don't know how we managed not to scream. I mouthed, "Don't move," and Dana nodded, her eyes glassy with panic. The flashlight beam danced across the window, like he was checking for movement inside. My heartbeat was so loud I thought he'd hear it. Then, without warning, the knocking stopped. For a second I hoped he gave up, but then we heard the sound, a slow scrape of metal against metal. He was jamming the crowbar into the seam of the back door. Testing it. Prying. Dana clenched my arm so tightly her nails dug in. I leaned over, grabbed my phone off the makeshift counter, and prayed that the emergency SOS would work even without service. Thankfully, Dana had shown me how to activate the silent emergency function a few days earlier, after seeing a video about it. I pressed and held the buttons, felt the phone vibrate, and silently prayed it had gone through. We didn't dare speak. The van creaked slightly under the man's weight as he leaned into the door. I could hear him breathing now, heavy and slow, like he was completely calm, taking his time. The metal groaned again, louder. I pictured the door snapping open, his face filling the frame. I reached slowly behind me and grabbed the small camping hatchet we kept next to the bed, though I had no idea what I'd do with it. Then, headlights. Far off, coming up the road. The man froze. I saw the beam of his flashlight jerk toward the approaching light, and for a brief second, he backed away from the van, just a few feet. Then he turned and ran, disappearing into the woods beside the overlook like he'd done it 1,000 times before. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until it came out in a gasp. Dana was shaking uncontrollably, whispering, "What the hell was that?" over and over. We didn't move. We didn't go outside. We waited, staring out the back window until the lights finally pulled in behind us. 2 police SUVs rolled up, blue and red flashing in the trees. I flung the curtain open and banged on the glass. An officer, young, short buzz cut, flashlight in hand, ran up to the driver's side and knocked. We scrambled forward and unlocked it. They came in fast, asked if we were okay, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the tree line. We told them everything. One of them listened while the other swept the area. A few minutes later, they told us something that made my stomach drop. We weren't the first to report that man. Apparently, in the last 3 weeks alone, there had been 2 similar calls from hikers and campers along that same stretch of road. Always around 2 or 3 a.m., always the same description. An older man, scruffy, quiet, holding a flashlight, sometimes a tool, sometimes nothing at all. Each time, he vanished before police arrived. But this time, they were closer. One of the officers told us in a low voice, like he didn't want the woods to hear him, that they believed he was a local fugitive who'd been evading arrest for months. He'd assaulted a gas station clerk upstate and was suspected in a string of break-ins across the county. They thought he was camping out in the forest, living off supplies he stole from parked cars and unattended sites. We gave our statements, described his clothes, his face, everything we could remember. The cops stayed with us until dawn, scanning the woods and even bringing in a dog team just as the sun started bleeding over the trees. They found boot prints near the edge of the overlook, fresh ones, heading straight toward where we'd been parked. One of the prints had a weird tread, like part of the sole had melted or been torn off. It was oddly specific. I still remember the pattern. The officer said it matched prints they'd found at another break-in site. That was enough for me and Dana. We were out of there the moment they cleared us to go. We didn't sleep the next night, or the one after. Every creak in the van, every branch tapping the roof, sent us into silent panic. We ended up cutting our trip short and driving straight back to California. I don't think either of us admitted it aloud, but the magic of the open road had died that night. We still talk about it sometimes, but mostly in fragments. Like it doesn't feel real unless we keep it a little blurry. What really gets me is how calm he was. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting or trying to scare us. He was methodical, patient. That's what kept me up for weeks, knowing he would have gotten in if we hadn't stayed quiet, if the cops hadn't shown up when they did. I don't know if they ever caught him. Maybe he's still out there waiting for the next van to roll into that overlook, knocking just soft enough to make you doubt yourself. But I do know one thing. If you ever find yourself pulled over in the middle of nowhere, thinking you've found the perfect quiet spot to sleep for the night, don't trust the silence. And whatever you do, don't answer the knock. I'm not exactly the road trip type. I get car sick, I hate gas station bathrooms, and the idea of being stuck in the middle of nowhere with no cell signal makes my skin crawl. But last August, my friend Derek finally convinced me to take a few days off and drive with him from North Carolina to Tallahassee for a music festival. He had this whole route planned. Scenic back roads, local diners, no interstates. I agreed because I trusted him. We'd been best friends since college, and honestly, I needed the break. Work had been hell, and I thought a little change of scenery might help. I never imagined that middle of nowhere Georgia would be the place where things got seriously messed up. It was the second day of the drive, late afternoon, somewhere outside of Valdosta. We had just left a gas station off a country highway, one of those old ones with a broken ice machine out front, and an old dog tied to a post. Derek missed a turn that his GPS called out too late, and instead of turning around, he figured we'd just loop back around on a different route. At first, the road was paved and lined with trees, kind of peaceful actually. Then the pavement turned to cracked gravel, then to dirt. And then we found ourselves creeping up behind a long line of cars moving way too slow. At first, we thought it was a funeral procession. Black vehicles, no headlights, all moving in perfect sync. But there was something off. No hazard lights, no police escort, and the cars all looked mismatched, like they were just whatever black vehicles these people happened to own. An old Crown Vic, a beat-up Escalade, a van with one of the taillights duct-taped. Derek slowed down behind them and we waited for a chance to pass. But every time we tried to edge over the center of the road, the lead car would drift just slightly to block us. No signal, no hesitation. We laughed nervously at first, like, okay, creepy, but whatever, just backwoods people doing their thing. But after 10 minutes of this slow crawl through cornfields and overgrown fence lines, I wasn't laughing anymore. Something about it didn't feel right. It felt rehearsed. Then the cars started to pull off the road one by one into this open clearing next to a collapsed barn. The wood was gray and splintered, roof caved in, like it hadn't stood upright in 20 years. I felt this drop in my stomach, like when you miss a step going downstairs. The lead car pulled in last and stopped directly in front of us, completely blocking the road. No room to pass, no driveway to turn into. I glanced at Derek, and he was frozen, hands on the wheel, not saying a word. Doors started opening. One by one, men stepped out, all dressed in black, not suits, not funeral black, just black pants, black button-ups, black hats like uniforms. None of them looked at us. Not at first. There were maybe 8 of them. All men, no women, no kids. They moved in this calm, deliberate way, like they weren't in any hurry, like they had all the time in the world and didn't care that we were sitting right there watching them. One of them, tall with this wiry build and a graying beard, stood out to me because he had something tucked into his belt. At first I thought it was a flashlight, but then I realized it was the wooden handle of a hammer. Not a tool belt, just a single old hammer like the kind you'd use to build a fence or something worse. That's when my brain started doing that thing it does when you're scared, but trying not to panic. I started noticing the wrong details, like how all the license plates on the cars were covered with strips of black tape. Derek whispered, "Dude, what is this?" Like I had any clue. My voice cracked when I told him to just back up. But the road behind us was narrow and winding, and we were in his big-ass Subaru. Not exactly built for quick getaways. Still, he shifted into reverse, slowly, and the car started creeping back. That's when the tall guy with the hammer finally looked at us. Not a glance, a stare, eyes locked. He tilted his head a little, and I swear it was like he was trying to remember us, like he knew us already. Then without a word, he started walking, straight toward us, slow and steady, like he had nowhere else to be and knew we wouldn't get far. That was the moment everything inside me just screamed. I slapped Derek's shoulder and yelled, "Go! Just go!" He floored it. The tires kicked up dirt and we jolted backward, fishtailing a little as he twisted the wheel to turn us around. I looked back and the man didn't flinch. He just kept walking toward us, hammer swinging gently at his side. As soon as we got turned around, Derek gunned it. We hit at least 50 on that dirt road, bouncing so hard I nearly cracked my head on the window. I kept looking back, expecting headlights or someone chasing us, but nothing. Just the empty road disappearing behind us, that awful barn vanishing between the trees. We didn't stop driving for almost an hour. No music, no talking, just the sound of tires on the road and the engine running hot. When we finally got back to the highway, I made Derek pull into a Waffle House because I needed a bathroom and a minute to breathe. I remember staring at myself in the mirror over the sink, hands shaking, trying to convince myself we were overreacting, that it was just some weird local thing. But then I overheard a guy in the booth behind us talking to his friend. He said something like, "They're still out near Cold Creek Road, right? The ones with the old barn?" I didn't even think. I stood up, turned around, and asked him what he meant. The look he gave me was the kind you give someone who's about to hear something they'll wish they hadn't. He looked at me for a long second, then said, "You're not from around here, are you?" I shook my head. He leaned in a little, lowered his voice and said, "Stay off those roads. There's an old group, not quite a church, not quite a gang. They've been out there for decades. Locals call them the procession. Cops have looked into it, but nothing ever sticks. They don't show up in the system, no names, no records, nothing. People say they use abandoned barns and roads to do whatever it is they do." I asked him what he meant by that, but he just shook his head and muttered, "People disappear." That was it. No drama. Just that. Like it was common knowledge. Back in the car, I told Derek everything the guy had said, and for the first time since the barn, he looked genuinely scared. He kept muttering, "We could have died. They weren't messing around, man." That ride to Tallahassee felt 10 times longer after that. Every time we passed an old barn or saw a cluster of cars on a side road, we both got quiet. I know it sounds paranoid, but I swear we were followed that night. Not right away, but on the last stretch of highway before we got into town, a pair of headlights showed up behind us and stayed there, perfectly distant for way too long. Then, just like that, they turned off onto an unmarked road. I didn't sleep much that weekend. Even during the festival, I kept looking over my shoulder. Derek was worse. He wouldn't let the car out of his sight and double-checked every lock on the motel door at least 3 times. After we got back home, we made a pact to never drive that route again. And yeah, we tried reporting it. Derek called the sheriff's office in Lowndes County, but they just gave him the usual runaround. Said unless a crime had occurred, there wasn't much they could do. When he described the barn and the cars, the guy on the line went quiet for a beat and then just said, "Best to stay out of those parts," then hung up. To this day, I don't know what exactly we stumbled into. Some fringe cult? A local secret people are too scared to talk about? I've thought about it way too many times, about what would have happened if we hadn't backed up fast enough, if the guy with the hammer had reached our car. I've even had dreams where we didn't make it out and I wake up gasping. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. We were on that road by accident. Just a wrong turn. That's it. And if something that dangerous, that organized, can be hiding in plain sight just off a county road, how many other wrong turns out there don't end with someone making it back?